For my whole career, I've been the guy who promotes how great technology is. So technology always bites me. So I'm sorry I was slow showing up because of some glitches. Let me give you my current kind of frame for thinking about policy. I think there were three enormously important legacies from the European Enlightenment. Science, the market, and democracy. I think science and democracy are under kind of a threat now that is really more serious than any they've faced since the Enlightenment. I think, although I'll talk about the comparable threat after the Great Depression. The moment I think it's the kind of the power that's kind of become unhinged of the market, which is one of the driving forces that's threatening both science and democracy. I won't go into any detail about the implications for democracy, but what I will say is that I think we need to think of science and the market as alternative systems to make discoveries and facilitate progress, and that we should therefore think about adjusting the dial so that things we might have thought it was important to do through the mechanisms of the market, we could actually do through the mechanisms of science. And then finally, describe what Julie is doing with Coleridge as something that's feeding in to the possibilities for adjusting the dial. Now, what's the alternative to these legacies from the Enlightenment? Well, it's really some form of authoritarian technocracy. And before the term was kind of like polluted by its affiliation with the Nazi Party, fascism was the term that emerged in Italy for this kind of vision of technocracy led by authoritarians. And in the wake of the Great Depression, when it seemed like the market was chaotic, ungovernable, dangerous, there was an appeal to going down this path of authoritarian technocracy. We know it turned out badly. We know why it's going to turn out badly again. But we're in a comparable period right now, I think, where people sense that there are real risks. Things are going wrong. And we have a choice between going down the path of, like Mussolini and authoritarian technocracy, or doing something like what we did when we created or strengthened the Federal Reserve System and built central banking as the way to avoid a repeat of the Great Depression. So I feel like we're really at a fork where we go down one of those two paths, and one is going to be disastrous. And you can see countries like in Eastern Europe, which are already headed in that direction of the kind of a strongman, technocracy. And you can see the appeal of this idea even here in the United States. Now, why is the market threatening democracy right now? The fundamental problem is that the huge power of ideas also creates a problem in the market. The fact that if I have some code, if I have a recipe that is very valuable, everybody can benefit from that recipe. It's not like if I have a bottle of a pharmaceutical solution that would save a life, that can only save one life. If I know the formula for making a bunch of bottles of that, like the formula for oral rehydration therapy, you can save like millions of lives by reusing it. But that potential for reuse means that if some entity discovers a formula or writes code, which is extremely valuable, they can use that code to surface every potential person in the market. So as code becomes a more and more important part of running a business, we're edging into a world where there's a natural tendency for a single firm to have the best code and to capture the entire market. So there's this tendency for what we used to call a natural monopoly that was the case for, say, distributing water, municipal water. You just couldn't get a competitive market in municipal water. We may be moving into a world where all of or many of our markets are becoming natural monopolies. And we now have some natural monopolies in digital services that are so big and so deeply involved in political advertising that I think they pose an enormous threat to the viability of democracy going forward. So what's the solution? You think back to things like searching the internet. I would be happy to put Google out of business right now. I think we'd be much better off. The world would be a better place. It'd be safer if we could just put Google out of business. So, well, what would happen if we didn't have internet search from Google? Well, if we didn't have it from Google, or for, and we suppose we make it impossible for any private company to be in this business. How would we get search? Well, we get search the same way we get things from Wikipedia. We get search from, the same way we get open source software where we can trust it. There are these mechanisms that involve open, transparent production of information, sharing, and then other financing mechanisms. And these are just intrinsically safer and less likely to generate these enormously powerful concentrations of economic and political power. So we can think about things like Wikipedia, open source, and all of the things that are done on university campuses as an alternative way to solve basic problems, to get new innovation, and one which is likely to be much, much safer. Artificial intelligence is one that justifiably is worrying a lot of people, that if one person or two people end up with control over enormous amounts of very powerful AI, this is going to be a bad outcome for everybody. So then what's the connection to data? Data will be the mechanism whereby firms keep a proprietary market, a proprietary advantage. We could abolish patents, and I don't think it would really pose any problem for Google and Facebook as monopolies, because they have the data already that gives them really an unchallengeable position in these markets. So we need to think about mechanisms like the one we set up for drilling, for fracking, for oil and gas, where you force disclosure of data that private firms discover. When you frack a well in some states, you have to publish information about the yield and about the formula for the fracking solution, like what ratio of sand to water and so forth it used. It turns out that by forcing companies to disclose this information, the rate of productivity growth in the fracking industry was higher because firms could learn from each other. So it's just kind of one more demonstration of Tony's point that like publicly available information is enormously valuable. I think we need to therefore think not just about weakening patent protection in some kind of areas like artificial intelligence, but even starting to mandate disclosure, as we did for, we did it for environmental reasons in fracking, but it turned out to have these other benefits. But if we're going to start to mandate disclosure of data, we have to have mechanisms for, say, protecting individual privacy and getting the public value that data can bring without letting anybody take advantage of that data to build another monopoly or to take advantage of individual people or firms. And what Julia is building is an organization that could be the kind of trusted entity that could serve this function of giving access to data. And I know that she may be nervous about the suggestion that we're going to pass laws that force Google and Facebook and Uber to dump all of their data into her organization. But I think that may be the future for us. I saw a presentation by somebody who was in charge of the research group at Uber, and they said, look, all of the research on autonomous vehicles is going to be done at Uber going forward because we have the best data. So just forget about it. If you want to do autonomous vehicle research in a university, you got to come work for us at Uber. I don't want to live in that kind of world. That's not the future I want for me or my grandkids. And I think disclosure of data could be a very important part of adjusting that dial, relying much more on these mechanisms for discovery and this dissemination of information that are grounded in the norms of science. And I think what Julie is doing is going to, be part of the path that will get us to that future. Thanks.